Hey everybody, I'm Julia from the Macedon Public Library, and today we have a special guest. His name is Brian, and he lives in my house because he's my husband. He is an astrophysicist and a science writer for the National Radio Astronomy Observatories, NRAO. And he's going to be talking about stars and planets that you can see in the night sky currently and make some recommendations. And now I'm going to get up off the chair, and he's going to come and join us.
Well, hello, everybody. I thought this Julia suggested this because looking at the night sky is one of these things that you can do on your own. You don't have to be clustered together. You don't have to violate stay at home. You can watch these things in your backyard, and it's something that can be both kind of fun and educational, depending on how you integrate it into your home learning. So to start off, I'll introduce a couple of websites. One of them is inthesky.org on the chalkboard. It's in-the-sky.org. And that is a website that provides a lot of resources about astronomy in general, what's different terms mean. It's got a whole bunch of background information. It is perfectly appropriate for kids and adults. And it's a great resource for what is happening this month, what different terms mean, and how to learn more about the sky. The other website is Stellarium, which is STELLARIUM.org, and that is a website for an app that will show you everything from what is the sky going to look like tonight or any time you want. It can give you what the names of different things are that you see in the sky. And it is a completely free application. You can have it on Windows or Apple or Linux. You can also have it on iOS and Android. They have extra packages that you can buy, but the basic package is more than enough that you'll need. And they're both free and open source and easy to use. So those are good resources to start with. Another one in terms of magazines, there is Sky and Telescope. There is also Astronomy Magazine. Both of those are really good resources. So, if you haven't looked at the night sky either in a long time or at all, a lot of what you can see depends upon how clear your skies are, both in terms of clouds, but also how much light pollution you have. So a lot of people live in urban areas or suburban areas where there is a lot of just ambient light in the sky, and that limits how much you can see, because the more light pollution you have, the less you'll be able to see dimmer objects. So if you happen to live in a much more rural area where the skies are really dark, you're going to see a lot more than if you look in your suburban backyard or something like that. But even with a fair bit of light pollution, there's still quite a few things you can see. So one of the easiest things that you're going to be able to see is some of the planets and some of the brighter stars. So one of the ways that you can tell, if you look in the night sky, you look up at night and you see something that you're not sure if it's a star or a planet, usually if it's really bright, it's a planet. But the way you can tell for sure is if you see something bright in the sky and you're not sure if it's a star or a planet, look to see if it's twinkling, if it's flickering. So the big difference between the two is that planets don't flicker, they don't twinkle. Stars twinkle. And the reason for that is because stars are very, very far away. They're light years away, and they look like points of light. And if you look at them in a telescope, they will still look like a point of light. So you have this very small dot of light. And when it comes to the sky, when it comes to the atmosphere, the little variations in temperature and ripples of air and wind and things cause the star to flicker. It's bending the light a little bit, and it causes it to flicker. You might even see that it changes color a little bit because of this. Planets, if you look at them in a telescope, will look like a little circle or a disk. Sometimes they'll look like a crescent shape, like the moon. It depends on what planet you're looking at. But because they have a shape, they're not just a little dot, they don't twinkle. So if you look at some bright thing in the sky and it's not moving across the sky like an airplane or something, then if it doesn't twinkle, it is a planet. And if it does twinkle, then it is probably a star. So when you're looking in the night sky, the thing is to remember what direction is what. So the best way to figure out is to know east and west. And that's pretty easy to know because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about are going to be in the evening after the sun is set, mostly in the west. And if you want to get up early in the morning, you can see in the morning before sunrise in the east. And so those are the kind of two areas where we're going to focus on. Since most people probably aren't going to get up early in the morning, you're probably going to be up in the evening. Let's start with what can be seen in the west after sunset, after evening. What can you see? And one of the big things now for pretty much all of April and into May is Venus. If you look to the west after sunset, you will see what looks like the brightest star in the west, and it's actually the planet Venus. Venus right now is near what they call greatest elongation, and that means that Venus is fairly far in position relative to the sun. It's fairly far away from the sun. Because Venus is a planet that orbits inside the orbit of Earth, we can never see it move very far away from the sun. It's either on one side or the other side of the sun. It'll never be in the sky high overhead at midnight, for example. Whereas Jupiter or Mars, and they orbit outside Earth's orbit, they can be high in the sky anytime. They can be close to the sun, they can be far away from the sun. So because Venus is an inferior planet, because it's inside the orbit of Earth, that means that we can only see it fairly close to the sun. So maximum elongation, when Venus is orbiting the sun like this, when it appears to be as far as it can be, when we look at it, that's called greatest elongation. And right now, that's where Venus is. So after sunset, as the sun is still setting below the horizon, Venus is up here like this. When the sun sets below the horizon, you can still see where Venus is. So Venus will be high in the sky, will be very bright, very easy to see. So basically, after sunset, look west. The brightest star-like object that you see will be the planet Venus. Now, if you happen to have a pair of binoculars or you have a small telescope and you look at Venus with this, you will see that it's kind of a half moon phase. And the reason is because it doesn't make its own light, it reflects light from the sun, and because it's fairly far away from the sun, only half of it that we see is illuminated by the sun. So you'll see this kind of half crescent phase, kind of like the moon. If you don't have a telescope, you'll still be able to see it. One of the things that's going to happen in early April, like the 3rd and the 4th of April, I think, is that Venus will be, when you look at it in the evening, it'll be very close or in the middle of a cluster of stars called the Pleiades. If you look at the west, you'll see these cluster of, probably you'll see 6 stars. Technically, there's 7 stars, the 7 sisters is the Pleiades, but you'll probably see 6 stars. And it looks like a little dipper shape. And so you can see Venus in among this kind of cluster of stars that's known as the Pleiades. So if you find Venus, you can find the Pleiades, and those are a couple of things that you can see in the evening. If you want to get up early in the morning and try and see some other planets in the morning, if you get up before sunrise and you look to the east before the sun comes up, you will see actually 3 planets fairly close together. They are Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Jupiter will be the brightest planet in the morning sky because it is the largest and closer to Earth than Saturn. Mars will be somewhat reddish. So basically, the brightest one that you see in the morning will be Jupiter. The reddish one you see will be Mars. And then the other one, the third one you see, will be Saturn. And if you look at these in a telescope, you might be able to see some features on Jupiter and Mars. But if you have even a decent telescope, you could probably catch some of the rings of Saturn. If you look at Jupiter with a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, you might see what look like little stars on either side of Jupiter, and those are the largest moons of Jupiter. So, but again, even if you don't have a pair of binoculars or a telescope, you can still see where these planets are. Another thing is that around the middle of April, around April 15th, the moon will be very close to all three of these planets. This is known as a conjugation. They are in the same basic area, and that's kind of a nice thing to check out. So those are things that you can see in the morning and evening. If you want a kind of school activity that you could do with kids, one thing you can do is you can see where Venus is, for example, every night. If you go out every night and try and see Venus, is it cloudy? Can you see it, yes or no? And then where is Venus relative to the Pleiades? And if you watch night after night, you will see that it drifts through the Pleiades and keeps going. So you can see the motion of the planet Venus relative to the stars and the Pleiades.
So take like a journal or
So you can take a journal or a notebook and just have your kids draw the pictures of what they see, where they see the different things. That is one of the things that you can do as an activity. You can do the same thing with the planets in the morning, although because they are further from the sun than the Earth, they move more slowly, and so that will be a little bit harder to notice. But if you can see, for example, the moons of Jupiter in a small telescope, you can watch those night after night in a small telescope and see how the moons move around Jupiter. You'll find them on either side. But even if you can't use a telescope, you can watch for where the moon is in the morning sky, and the moon will move over time relative to where the planets are. And so you can see the motion of the moon night after night relative to the planets and the stars. So those are some things that you can see both in the morning and the evening. They're really bright, pretty much, unless you're in a really, really bright urban environment, you'll be able to see them in the sky. Planets are still fairly bright. They're easy to find. So even if you're not seeing a lot of stars, you should be able to see the planets and, of course, the moon in your sky, in your neighborhood. That should be a thing that everybody should be able to see no matter where you are, at least in the Rochester area, because even in the city, you can see that. If you happen to have some amount of darkness, some amount of clear sky, then you can look for stars. There are various constellations in April. Two that are fairly easy to see are the constellation of Orion and the Big Dipper, which is part of the constellation of Ursa Major. So Orion will be easy to see at night after sunset in the west. So in that same general region where Venus is, if you look towards the west, really a little bit more towards the southwest, you will probably see what looks like 3 stars in a straight line. Orion is always easiest to find by looking for 3 stars in a straight line. And if you can find 3 stars in a straight line, that forms the belt of Orion. And then you will see a couple of stars above the belt, a couple of stars below the belt. That forms kind of a stick figure type of shape. So it looks like a hunter or a bowman or something. You can tell which way this is because when you look to the higher stars, one of the stars that you will see is a reddish one. It's one of the few bright red stars in the sky, and that's the star Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse, depending on how you want to pronounce it. That is the star that if you pay attention to some of the science articles they talk about, recently it's grown dimmer, and there was talk about whether or not it would explode as a supernova. Well, now it's brightening back up to its normal brightness level, so I don't think it's going to go to a supernova anytime soon, but it is one of the few bright red stars that you can see. And it's a nice constellation to look at that you can watch over the sky. The other one is the Big Dipper. It looks kind of like a dipper or a frying pan. It will be actually fairly high in the sky. It is towards the north, but it is high in the sky. And when you look at it, you'll see the 4 stars that form the pan and then 3 stars that form the handle. In this case, because it is spring, you'll see the Big Dipper as upside down. And the way you can remember that is that through the year, the Big Dipper drifts. Sometimes it's lower in the sky and higher in the sky, but it moves around the North Star. And it's upside down, and one way to remember that is that in spring, the rains fall from the sky, so the Big Dipper pours out in the spring. So every spring, the Big Dipper is upside down. So you'll see the 4 stars of the pan upside down, and then the handle will curve away that way. So a couple of nice things that you can do with that. Again, depending on how clear your skies are, if they are dim enough, you might be able to see the North Star Polaris. It's a somewhat dim star, so in a bright area, you might not see it very well. But if you find the Big Dipper and you have the 4 stars of the pan and then the handle, if you look at those 2 stars of the upside down pan and follow them about 5 distances, follow those as a straight line, you will find a fairly dim star, but still visible by the naked eye. That is the North Star Polaris. So if you ever find that, you know that that is the direction of the north. A little bit of history connection. Big Dipper was also called the drinking gourd. So during the Underground Railroad, one of the ideas was if you want to know what the north direction is, look for the drinking gourd. That'll be towards the north. You know that's going to be towards freedom. So that's another one that you can look at. If you want a challenge, if you have a deep, dark enough sky, if you look at the stars of the handle of the Big Dipper, the middle one of the 3 stars that form the handle, the middle one is a little bit different from the others because it's actually a double star. And so, you know, if you want a thing for your children, you can say, you know, you notice any of them are different, they may see that it is a double star. You have to have good vision to be able to see it, but you know, that's one of the few easy to find double stars in the night sky. So there are other stars and things that you can check out. One possible thing is that right now we're looking at a comet coming from that same general region, kind of from the North Pole area around Polaris, that is coming towards the inner solar system and will be getting brighter. Now, right now, it can be seen with a telescope. And as astronomers have been tracking this comet, it's been getting rather bright rather quickly. They get bright because as they get close to the sun causes the icy surface of the comet to sublime, to turn to gas, and it makes this bright kind of cloud region. Comet is a hairy star, cometa, and that tail of the comet is because of gas and dust. So we don't know whether or not it will be bright enough to see with the naked eye, but right now it seems to be brightening fairly quickly. So as it comes closer to the Earth, it may get bright enough to see with the naked eye, and if so, that would probably happen mid to late April. So, you know, keep an eye out for that. You might be able to see a comet with the naked eye in the later part of the month. But again, comets sometimes brighten up for a little bit and then dim, and then you can't really see them very well anyway. But that's also what's happening in the night sky. So those are several things that are happening. Again, if you go to inthesky.org, it'll tell you things about whether the comet is coming up or other things you might be able to look at in the night sky. And then if you want to look at different ways that the sky looks, you can look up stellarium.org, and that is a great app. It can also, Stellarium is available both on the iOS App Store and the Android Google Play Store, so it's available on both phones, whether it's Android or iPhone, and it's free, and it's a great resource for finding out what the sky looks like now and what it might look like at other times. So I hope you find this informative. If you have questions, you can always if you have questions, you can email Macedon Library Director, all strung together, at owl.org. So AWWL.org. Sorry, OWWL. I will learn my alphabet at some point. But Macedon Library Director at OWWL.org. And if you email the Macedon Director with any questions you have, I'll be happy to answer them, and maybe we'll do another one of these later in the future. So I hope you have a good day and a good night.
All right, thanks everybody. Oh, sorry, I'm going to end the meeting. Bye.